Hello everyone, welcome to my channel and to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the New York 12th District congressional race. The Justice Democrats is an organization that was founded January 2017. It is made by up of many former leaders in the Bernie Sanders campaign of 2016. And it has as a stated goal to elect progressives to positions of power, for instance the House of Representatives and the US Senate. And the way that the Justice Democrats go about this is often challenging old conservative Democrats in safe Democratic districts that often have voted for conservative Democrat policies and does not no longer represent their districts. For instance, the Justice Democrats were behind the election of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to the House of Representatives in 2018 when she beat heir to the speakership and conservative Democrat Joe Crowley. They have also been behind the electoral successes of people like Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, and Jamal Bowman, all members of the squad. And the Justice Democrats were active both in the 2018 Democratic primaries and the 2020 Democratic primaries for the House of Representatives. And the next big midterm election is 2022, and Justice Democrats have already begun making some very interesting endorsements. One of them is for a woman named Odessa Kelly running in a district in Tennessee. But the one I'm going to be talking about today is a woman named Rana Abdelhamid, who is running to represent New York's 12th congressional district. She announced her campaign for the House of Representatives 14th of January this year. It will be an interesting campaign, and that is what this video is going to be about. So guys, first let's look at who Rana Abdelhamid is. Well, she is a 27-year-old Egyptian-American woman from the township of Astoria in New York, meaning she lives in the 12th congressional district. And she's from a working class background and has worked at Google. However, she also founded an initiative for young women to protect themselves, and she has a black belt in karate. This, paired with her social activism, has made her a figure in New York and also worldwide. There are plenty of videos on YouTube if you want to learn more about her. She is also a DSA member, which kind of tells you a little bit about where she stands politically. So Rana Abdelhamid is challenging incumbent Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. She has been in Congress since 1992 and is, I would say, a typical establishment Democrat. She has had some very disastrous votes during her tenure, for instance voting for tough on crime policies during the 90s that has had a profound effect on black and brown Americans, like for instance the ones living in her very own district. And she has had some very bad foreign policy votes, for instance voting for the Afghanistan and the Iraq war. And of course this does not make her a progressive, although she says that she supports Medicare for all and she is a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. But as with many members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, I do not think she would be effective in pushing a progressive agenda when talking to the Biden administration. Not least of the reasons why I think this is that she receives a lot of corporate donations for her campaigns, and those come, for instance, from the real estate sector that's very powerful in her city, and from investment firms like BlackRock. I have a picture where it shows where she has received her campaign donations from. and it's certainly not a progressive thing to do to take money in that way. If you want real change, it's the only people that the representatives ought to be accountable to is the people of the district. So Carolyn Maloney is certainly a Democrat ready to say farewell to the Congress after having served there way over her time, I believe. And quite indicative of this is that she has received a lot of primary challenges, and I think in the last 2 election cycles, especially the 2021, she has been challenged by some very strong progressives running to the left of her. The last one being a guy named Surai Pater, and he received almost enough votes to topple Maloney, but the progressive vote was kind of split between 2 candidates, him and another woman who was also a progressive, I've been told, named Lauren Ashcraft. So I think it will be very important for Rana Abdelhamid's victory that the progressive vote is consolidated around her. Surai Patel, who for some time has been contesting the results of his primary and saying it was an unfair vote count, has released a statement that I think is very problematic, saying that he wants to still be a part of the fight, as he calls it. I hope that is not called for running, because that could split the progressive vote and damage movement altogether. And another thing that's important to point out is that the establishment is really on guard for this progressive challenge. In New York, a lot of establishment Democrats that no longer reflect the districts that they serve in their electoral record has been challenged by real progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jamal Bowman, and they have been ousted. And the same thing could happen here with Carolyn Maloney. Therefore, the establishment is on guard and already throwing some punches. So one of the people that has come out batting for the Democratic establishment and Representative Maloney is the New York State Democratic Chairman J.S. Jacobs. He released a statement on the very same day that Abdelhamid announced that she was running, talking about the socialists' challenge to Congresswoman Maloney. Scary stuff. And he said that although Abdelhamid had every right to be running, backed by the Justice Democrats, her claims that Carolyn Maloney isn't sufficiently progressive is, according to Jacobs, pure nonsense. Because as we all know, the most progressive thing you could do is take money from big dollar interests like the real estate industry to do their bidding. Just ask top progressive Nancy Pelosi. And in the second paragraph, he talks about some of the things that Carolyn Maloney has actually delivered. And there is some arguably good legislation in there. Things that protect credit card debt holders, women, and so forth and so on. But is it enough, considering her record that we have discussed previously in this video? But it's really in the third paragraph that he goes in for the kill. He says that the DSA and Abdelhamid ought to be honest about what they are offering voters. He says, tell voters where you and the DSA stand on defunding the police, ending capitalism in America, unilaterally disarming the nuclear deterrent of the US military, and seizing private businesses. He says that Abdelhamid should tell voters why she favors the decriminalization of, quote, sex work, and that 27-year-olds who commit violent crimes should now be considered youthful offenders. Simply, he says, the DSA wants America to replace the capitalist system with a historically proven failure of socialism. That's real scary. So I looked at Abdelhamid's campaign promises under the tab of our policies. And what you can see there is that there's no reference whatsoever to ending capitalism. Instead of talking about defunding the police, there's talk of demilitarization, and the rest of the priorities seem pretty good if you're a working class New Yorker that isn't afraid of the smears coming from the establishment. It talks about giving every person healthcare, prioritizing the environment, and providing good housing for people in the district. It's a very unequal district, and many people struggle to remain housed in it. So the establishment tried, but I think they ultimately failed to make an impact on Abdelhamid, because I think people are familiar with the establishment's tactics and do not necessarily buy them in heavy democratic districts. So the Justice Democrats had an official launch with Rana Abdelhamid, and they posted it to YouTube. I have made a super cut of it. Let's take a look at their event together.
Please join me in welcoming Alexander Rojas, Executive Director of Justice Democrats.
Hey everybody! Wow, I gotta follow Councilman Landry there. That was a lot. That was great. But hello everyone tuning in. I am so deeply excited, honored, and humbled to be here. My name is Alexandra Rojas, and I am the founding member and current Executive Director of Justice Democrats. For those of you that don't know, we're a grassroots organization dedicated to recruiting and electing the next generation of progressive working class candidates to run for Congress by recruiting local leaders nominated by their own community to challenge corporate-backed politicians, including Democratic incumbents. Rana Abdelhamid has dedicated her life to protecting her neighbors and community members when politicians have failed to act. She has spent her life, all 27 years, fighting tirelessly for her community against racism and economic insecurity, and we are so proud to support and go all in on Rana's campaign for progressive change. She is exactly the kind of Democrat we need in Congress right now. And today, for that reason, is so special. Right now, we're live streaming from here in Little Egypt, the heart of Rana and her family's community, and one of the hardest hit parts of New York by the pandemic and the economic crisis that followed. At the same time, Rana is launching a campaign that is going to be run from the bottom up to take on one of the wealthiest members of Congress who has been in office for over 3 decades, representing one of the most unequal districts in America. If New York is a tale of 2 cities, then New York 12 is a tale of 2 districts. And the current representative, Representative Carolyn Maloney, has only served 1. And in New York's 12, it faces one of the 10th highest levels of income inequality in the nation. And if it were a nation or a country, it would be the 9th highest in the world. Over her time in office, Representative Maloney has taken millions from corporate PACs, whether it be Wall Street, real estate developers, to profit off the suffering of working class New Yorkers, just like Rana and her family. She also supported the 1994 crime bill, along with Ray Kelly and racist policing practices like stop and frisk, and has even falsely claimed that vaccines are linked to autism. I could go on. It will be a race filled with joy and hope and a fierce commitment to the progressive movement and priorities that we all represent. Rana is going to form a coalition of young people, of progressives, of communities of color, of immigrants, of small business owners, and working and middle-class New Yorkers who are hungry for representation that looks like them, that fights for them, and believes in them. It's time to usher in a new generation of progressive leadership into the Democratic Party. And this year, we're getting started here in New York with Rana Abdelhamid for Congress.
All right. Thank you so much. Cannot imagine how proud you are today, Abdelhamid, and for good reason. Now it's time to hear from the candidate herself. Here's Rana.
Thank you all so much. I'm just so grateful for everyone's words and your stories and your commitment to this. I just feel really lucky today. I feel a lot of gratitude, a lot of love, and it's a reminder of why I'm doing this. So thank you. My dad's making a heart to me. So thanks for reminding everyone that I'm the challenge child. So again, thank you all so much for being here. As I was introduced, my name is Rana Abdelhamid, and I'm the child of working class immigrants, the founder of a nonprofit organization, and a community organizer. I was born and raised right here in Queens, and today I'm here to talk to you about why I'm running for Congress. For the past couple of months, I have been building this campaign. It's a campaign that is rooted in this district, our shared struggles, shared values, shared hopes, because I'm rooted in this district. Like so many New Yorkers, I'm the child of immigrants. My parents both came here from Alexandria, Egypt. When my mom arrived in New York City, it was on July 4th, 1992. And that was a few years after my dad. He told her that the fireworks in the sky were just for her, that they were New York's way of saying, welcome home. My parents were drawn to Astoria because of two things, the water and the community. The water reminded them of the Mediterranean where they grew up, and the North African community was our refuge, where you can hear Arabic and smell fresh pita bread, and where strangers didn't stare at the women in hijab and long flowing abayas. Women like my mom. As a child, I watched my parents work every single day, and most nights to make ends meet. They never complained. They always knew it wouldn't be easy, but it shouldn't have been so hard. Our community was always our safe haven. And after 9/11, that community we built became more important than ever. Fathers and brothers were harassed by the police. Our mosques and community centers were surveilled. And when I was just 16 years old, a man tried to rip off my hijab and assaulted me on the street. I fought back and was able to get away. Then I vowed to make sure it never happened to anyone else. So I did what my dad did. I built the community people like me needed. I took that experience of assault and used it along with my black belt in karate to create safety for my community. That year, I started Melika, an organization to train women in self-defense. And what began as a karate class with 4 girls in the basement of a local community center is now a grassroots nonprofit that has reached 20,000 women across the world. I learned what leadership meant by watching my dad in Almanwa and my mom and my aunties in our neighborhood. They taught me that when things got hard, our communities could take care of each other with the resources we had. That if we came together, we could overcome impossible odds. But over the past year, that became harder. Last March, like so many New Yorkers, my family contracted COVID-19. All of us got sick. But my mom, she got really sick. Over the course of a few days, her breathing got worse and worse, and we didn't know if she would pull through. This was a dark time for our city. It was a dark time for my family. Watching the news day after day, we made an impossible decision to keep my mom home. More than one doctor told us she'd have a higher chance of surviving there than at a Queens hospital. If things got dire, they said, we should bring her across the bridge to Manhattan, where hospitals had more resources. Fortunately, my mom eventually did get better, but the experience was a turning point for me, a wake-up call. My mom, my family, my community, we'd been left behind, left to die, literally. And political leadership was missing in action. As small businesses suffered and then shuttered, as immigrants were excluded from federal aid, as more and more New Yorkers got sick, went hungry, and struggled to find a place to sleep at night, the people who were supposed to represent this district were nowhere to be found. The people who were supposed to fight for this district weren't fighting for anything. And I realized this was nothing new here, not with Carolyn Maloney in charge. If New York is a tale of 2 cities, then under Maloney, New York 12 has been a tale of 2 districts. And she has only served one, the one that bankers and billionaires call home. She's been a representative in Congress for my entire life, but she's never actually represented the people or the needs of most of this district. She's never fought for us. Sometimes she's even fought against us. I know because I've been on the other side. I've lived the issues facing this district. From over-policing to underfunded public schools, from gentrification to jeopardized air quality, from housing insecurity to failing hospitals. And I've had to live the solutions too, because her leadership has failed time and time again. Despite what she says, Congresswoman Maloney hasn't fought for fair housing. Instead, she's pocketed millions and millions of dollars each election cycle from the real estate developers and landlords who make up her largest donors. And she's even profited from firms that evict tenants who can't afford rent. She hasn't fought for small businesses like my dad. Instead, she's fought for corporations to come set up shop in our backyard and replace him. She hasn't fought against the surveillance and violence that religious minority communities like mine experience. Instead, she's dressed up in a burqa on the House floor and voted for the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. She hasn't fought to end police brutality. Instead, she voted for the 1994 crime bill that destroyed so many of her constituents' lives. And as recently as 2017, she fought to get former NYPD Commissioner Ray Kelly selected to lead the FBI, even though he championed the city's racist and unconstitutional stop and frisk policy. And during the pandemic, she's held too few town halls and still refuses to apologize for her past record of linking vaccines to autism. Still, we as New Yorkers aren't helpless. We've rallied against gentrification and displacement. We've set up community fridges and fundraised for our undocumented neighbors. We've taught ourselves self-defense. We've marched against an over-militarized, under-trained police that disproportionately impacts our Black and Brown communities. But we've had to do it all without effective leadership and in the face of failed policy. We deserve better. We deserve to live free, fair, full lives. We deserve to live in safety. We deserve to live with healthcare. We deserve to live without hunger. We deserve to live in housing we can actually afford. And we deserve a leader who won't stop fighting for us even when things get hard, because they will get hard. Over the next few years, thousands of businesses will rebuild or they won't. Our families will find ourselves on stable footing or we won't. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity as we reopen our schools, as we reinvest in our economy, to build a city that works for all of us, no matter our zip code or our income, but only if we put in the work. That's why I'm running for Congress, because I love this district, all of this district, and I'm so ready to fight for it. Of course, one person isn't going to change all of this overnight. Congress usually doesn't work for working people, but if we vote for the New York 12 we deserve, not just the one that we've had, we can change this city and this country. Together, we will fight for housing justice for all, because every New Yorker, especially the 72% of residents in our district who are renters, should feel the dignity and safety of home. Together, we will fight for single-payer Medicare for all, because getting sick should never be a reason for going broke. Together, we'll fight for a Green New Deal and green union jobs, because we can't preserve our communities if we don't preserve our planet. We'll fight for economic justice, because we'll only have a fair shot at a better future if the richest Americans pay their fair share in taxes. We'll fight for comprehensive immigration reform, because I know that immigrants, like my parents, give their all to this country. We'll fight to ensure Black Lives Matter with real policy reform, like ending mandatory minimum sentencing and reimagining how we conduct policing in this country. And we'll fight for a pandemic recovery and relief that first addresses the communities who've been impacted hardest by it. Sometimes I imagine what things would have been like if my dad never lost his deli. I'll never know, but I do know that there's a better city and country waiting to be built by those of us who are willing to work. Imagine you didn't have to live paycheck to paycheck, if you didn't have to worry about healthcare and childcare costs. Imagine if our public schools were desegregated and equitable. Imagine if you felt secure in your home, if you felt safe walking down the streets of your neighborhood. Imagine if you could have access to those in power. We can make those dreams a reality if we have true representation. Representation for all of us, not just those at the top. That's why I'm running for Congress. And I hope you join me, because like so many other moments in my life, I can't do this without New Yorkers having my back. This is why I'm running to represent New York's District 12, and I need you all to have my back. Thank you.
So for me, this is really inspiring. You talk about someone with a minority background that has been endorsed by progressive groups like Justice Democrats, someone who is a DSA member, connecting them clearly to the progressive vision for the country that's being carried out in the House of Representatives and the Senate by members like Bernie Sanders and Jamal Bowman. I think it is also very moving that she comes from a type of background that has gotten her through the experience of being in unsecure housing in New York, having to move around because landlords take too much in rent in a fastly gentrifying city. I just think she would be great for Congress considering the priorities that she has outlined. But there's a discussion to be had on whether she ought to be the progressive nominee if Surai Patel gets more attention, has more name recognition. I think that's a possibility, and she ends up being a spoiler. However, I don't think necessarily that's the case. So this race will be quite interesting. I do not think that after an intense primary challenge in 2016, 2018, 2020 and now in 2022, Carolyn Maloney will be able to hold on to her seat. And that will mean another Justice Democrat in Congress. I'll post updates on this if there are any. I will post debates if Maloney actually dares to meet a progressive challenger. And that will be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and please consider subscribing if you want to know the latest about the hot congressional races of 2022 and those already underway in 2021, like Nina Turner's race. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.